We're still in the dark about who the future occupant of number 10 is going to be, but we do know they're going to have to learn to like the idea of electoral reform.
Well, back here in Glasgow, I'm joined by our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian, let's talk about Gordon Brown's decision to step down. We thought it might happen. What are your thoughts on the timing and the manner?
It's a question of personal dignity for Gordon Brown. I think the manner of his departure maintained that dignity, but it's also a question of political calculation. He has calculated, no doubt following advice and discussions, that the only way to sustain his Labour Party in power and to keep him, of course, in office in the interim period is for him to announce that he is stepping aside, that he is removing one obstacle to that possible deal with the Liberal Democrats. The big snag, of course, is that is just one obstacle. There is one rather larger obstacle, which is that Labour plus the Liberal Democrats do not a coalition make. They don't have the numbers together to command a majority.
That being the case, Labour have to look beyond the Liberal Democrats if they're to form any sort of stable government, perhaps to the Nationalists, perhaps to the SNP. What would be the price of that sort of deal?
Perhaps to the SNP indeed, although there are many Labour MPs, particularly in Scotland, who so cordially loathe the SNP that I think they'd rather be in opposition than do a deal with them. My understanding is that the SNP offer would be that if Labour and the Liberal Democrats can themselves form a pact, form a coalition, that the SNP would offer to add to that by supporting that coalition on confidence motions and on supply, in other words, money to you and the budget. The price from the SNP, I think, would be that they would demand full fiscal autonomy for the Scottish Parliament, tax powers, full spending powers, and that's a very, very big ask indeed. But if it comes to the situation that this new Labour Lib Dem coalition requires to stay in office, perhaps they might be prepared to pay that price. I think it is still more probable. That there is a deal between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, because together they can form the stable government of which everyone is talking.
Brian, we'll return to you a little later, but now let's get the very latest from Westminster. Gary Robertson is there. Gary.
Thanks, David. Well, it's been a remarkable day here at Westminster, and joining me now is Angus Robertson MP, who's leader of the SNP's Westminster Group. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Gary.
The notion of getting into bed with Labour, it's just political opportunism, isn't it?
Well, first off, today has been a remarkable day, and I think it would be fair to say at the start that obviously we've had a big announcement by Gordon Brown. He's a man of significant political stature, public life in Scotland and the UK, 13 years as Chancellor, now Prime Minister, and I'd like to pay tribute to him for all of his, obviously big differences between our parties, but he's been a very significant political figure.
Does it make the idea of a coalition involving you and the Labour Party easier, the fact that he's not at the helm?
Well, I think it makes it more realistic as a prospect, but your opening question was, I wouldn't choose to be jumping into bed with other political parties, but I think there is a recognition that there is another option to a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition. The fact that the Prime Minister has decided that he's moving on, I think makes it possible, and he himself said that the possibility of a progressive coalition, that's a non-Conservative parties working together, is a possibility. Now, we have said from the start, from the general election results through till now, that we're prepared to work with other political parties to deliver a progressive agenda, and we stand ready to do that.
Even a political party that you talked about having a catastrophic financial failure?
Well, I think we have to recognise that the result in Scotland was decisive, and it was decisive in as far as 85% of the electorate said that they did not want the Conservatives. They have one MP in Scotland, and I think it behoves all political parties. We go through election campaigns...
But do you think your electorate, the people who put a cross in the SNP box, were voting for you to prop up a Labour government?
Well, I think people in Scotland would far rather that progressive political parties work together and try to take the edge of the financial crisis, be prepared to reform this place, have a proper electoral system that actually reflects the priorities of the people, and try to improve the interrelationship between devolved governments in Scotland and the other nations in the UK and the UK government. That is what's on the table. I think that's quite an attractive option.
Do you think SNP supporters could buy this?
Oh, most certainly. I think the option for SNP or Labour or Lib Dem voters between us working together and a Tory government would win hands down. I mean, let's think about this for a second.
But they must wonder, previously, when you talked about a lax regime that presided over by Gordon Brown that brought about the banking crisis, when you talk about this Labour government that took us into an illegal war in Iraq, and now you're willing to prop them up? That might seem pretty unusual to a lot of your supporters.
Well, all the more reason to get involved in an arrangement to stop this kind of thing happening. And this is the attraction in these difficult times of actually working together. It means that you are able to influence other political parties. And to be sure, if the SNP were in a coalition arrangement, we certainly wouldn't be going into illegal and immoral wars. Absolutely right. Yes, we would be in favour of the banks being regulated appropriately, and plenty else besides. That's the advantage of parties working together. But I think political parties need to take...
So you would have the influence, you believe, with your 6 members to actually bring about these changes?
Well, I think everybody is acknowledging that no political party won an outright majority in the general election. That means the only way to get stable government is parties to work together. Now, of course, the SNP probably has the most experience of this of any political party in the UK, having run a minority administration in Scotland since 2007.
Sure, well, that's a given. What is your price for? Well, what's your price for getting involved with the Labour Party here? Well,
I'm not starting out with preconditions. I mean, what the SNP talked about in the general election campaign is well known. I think we need to
fiscal autonomy. Then that would be your bottom line.
I'm not getting into red lines and bottom lines, but yes, we're in favour of fiscal autonomy. Yes, we're in favour of electoral reform. Yes, we're in favour of a series of measures that we think would improve governance in the short term. All of these are matters that we've discussed in a series of meetings with the civil service so far, and should other political parties start off an engagement with us, these are matters we would take forward. But with the greatest respect, we wouldn't be having those negotiations on Newsnight Scotland, much as that would be of interest to yourself and viewers tonight. It would. But I think we are in interesting time, very interesting times. I don't think people, when they went to the ballot box in Inverness or Cornwall or anywhere between, voted Lib Dem to get a Conservative government, especially in Scotland.
Okay, well, we'll leave
we have the opportunity for a progressive alliance. We should work together.
I think, given the political situation, I'm sure we will talk again. Angus Robertson, thank you very much. We'll have more from Westminster a little later, but back to you, David.
Gary, thanks very much indeed. Well, in Glasgow now, I'm joined by the Labour MP David Cairns. Last year, he resigned his ministerial post in the Scotland office amid a flurry of criticism of Gordon Brown's leadership. David Cairns, you didn't really rate Gordon Brown as a leader. Are you glad he's going?
Well,